Every city talks, but Bangkok doesn't just talk. It shouts or it whispers. It argues with itself and it lies to your face all at the same time. You can stand in front of like a 200-year-old temple and see the reflection of a 70-story glass skyscraper in those mirrored tiles. And you can eat a 50 baht noodle soup on a plastic stool if you want to, on a random sidewalk. That was maybe just a few years ago the site of a profound political conflict. Yet this city, Bangkok, is a text written in a dozen different competing languages even. And if you learn how to read it, you start to understand the story that's behind it, that tells you about power, about the future, about what it has chosen to forget as well. And today, I thought it's a good day. Today is a good day. Today is a good day to, learn a bit about Bangkok or learn how to read Bangkok. Because, while this podcast is mindful media and communication, reading, text, understanding is a big part of communication. And I'm coming here from Bangkok, and I've never talked about Bangkok before, so it's time to read Bangkok. So, Sawadee-krap and welcome to another episode here for the Funky Pod Mindful Media and Communication. And today we are putting our theoretical goggles on again to make sense of the media world, as always, but with a Bangkok twist, of course. So, how do I bring this together, right? Well, from my point of view, and come with me on the journey, if you will, for just a second, the city itself is actually the biggest piece of media possible. And I want to argue that Bangkok primarily communicates through a set of competing languages, not complementing, but competing languages. First, we will deconstruct the language the city used to talk to us, the official languages, if you will, languages of aspiration, erasure, and so on. Then we look at how the city talks back through the language of resistance. And finally, we're going to explore the most important question: how do we, as individual citizens, learn to live and communicate in the middle of all this noise? Because if you're honest, while Bangkok is amazing, it is noisy AF. So let's start with what I just mentioned. Let's start with the language of aspiration, okay? It's the first and the loudest language. It's the language of like this gleaming, globalized future, okay? It's the story that Bangkok tells the world. Yeah, and the story, it tells itself about what it wants to be or what it wants to become. Yeah, the grammar of this language is glass, steel, light, okay? And the most fluent speakers of this language are, of course, if you've ever been to Bangkok, you've seen this, luxury malls. They are everywhere. You can walk through all of downtown, like the shopping downtown Bangkok, without even seeing the light. You can go from one mall to the other. You can walk from CM Paragon to Central World and Ratchaprasong. In the meantime, you can also then go into like CM Center and Central Embassy and MBK, and it's crazy. So it's not just a shopping district, okay? It's like meticulously crafted vision of a very specific future. So looking at this, we can use our first tool/theory to analyze this, okay? The theory we call in communication studies the semiotics of space in this case in particular. So semiotics is the study of science, okay? The science, not science, my German, science. So in this case, those towering LCD screens everywhere, right? The pristine marble floors, for example, the English/French language luxury brands everywhere. All those things communicate a clear meaning: modernity, wealth, and belonging to the global elite. But that's not all. That's like very, very surface level, okay? Let's go deeper than just the science, okay? Since we talk about French luxury brands, let's bring in a French theorist, okay? But let's go deeper than this, okay? Since we just talked about French luxury brands, let's bring in a French theorist. The French theorist, this guy named is Roland Barthes. I hope I pronounced this correctly. If not, sorry. But what he talked about is myth. Okay, that's like a big deal that we also discuss in communication studies. So he argues that society takes signs, right, and empties them of their original meaning. So they don't mean what they used to mean. And why does this happen? Because society creates new meanings, a new dominant meaning. Dominant meaning means it's gonna be the meaning that people associate with that sign when they think about it. Okay, so they create like what he calls a modern myth. Yeah, so you take something that used to have meaning before, strip it away from that meaning, and give it a new meaning. And then moving forward, people will associate the new meaning with it right away. So the myth that's being sold here isn't just buy this watch, for example. What is the myth that's being sold? Happiness. Yeah, happiness will be achieved through consumption. That's the myth that's being sold in all those fancy malls. Yeah, national identity is best expressed through economic power. That's what's being sold, okay? And Bangkok is the place on the world stage alongside Singapore, Hong Kong, New York, and so on. Okay, so that's the myth that's being sold here. Okay, so we are stripping away the old myth, the old, I don't know, understanding of what Bangkok used to be. And now it's like we're making Bangkok that hub of like, luxury and, great malls and all those things. Okay. And if you don't believe me, well, it's okay. But the perfect place to see all this in action here in Bangkok, right? All the malls, of course, but in particular, our mega mall, Icon-Siam. I mean, they literally built a traditional floating market inside the ground floor of an ultra-luxury mall. It's a brilliant, very cynical move. It takes the authentic sign of traditional Thai life and completely co-opts it, sanitizes it, and makes it a themed attraction to lure tourists into the air-conditioned temple of Apple, Gucci, and so on. It communicates that even our tradition and history are most valuable when they can be used to serve the language of aspiration. But that's not all, right? Of course. I mean, the language of aspiration is the one that's like yelling, hey, hey. But as I mentioned in the intro, there's more. There's also the language of erasure. And, for every new skyscraper that goes up, and there are many, a piece of the old city has come down. And that's now the more subtle language of Bangkok, the language of erasure. That's the story of like what is intentionally forgotten to make way for the shiny future we just talked about. If you go back to Ratchapr's song, that the area where like lots of those malls are, okay, in 2010, right? Yeah, it was a site of like a violent military crackdown on like pro-democracy protests. Almost 100 people died, and then the chaotic hours in Central World, the big shopping mall, was set on fire. So now from a communications perspective, the aftermath is just as important as the event itself. Because the government and the corporations immediately launched like a massive PR campaign with slogans like, and I had to write it down, "Together we can," and "Rebuild Thailand." There was a masterclass in what we call narrative reframing, an effort to immediately pivot the story from political trauma to national unity and resilience. And that brings me to the next theory, the next concept, which is called collective memory. So societies choose what to remember, but more powerfully, they also choose what to forget. And at Rajaprasong, we see like an act of state-managed amnesia. If you walk around the intersection today, you'll find no official monument, no plaque, no public acknowledgement of the lives lost. The physical scrubbing of the site and the communicative like blitz to move on in a statement of power that says, we control the official history, and this event is no part of it. And this is where the space becomes kind of haunted. And there's another theorist called Mark Fisher, building on famous principles of Derrida. He talked about hauntology. The idea that the present is haunted by lost futures of the past. And, this relentless cheerfulness of the rebuild of Rajaprasong, in this case, feels pretty uncanny if you know the history, precisely because it's haunted by the ghosts of the 2010 conflict. The official story of prosperity tries to shout down the ghosts, but the silence about what actually happened there makes the haunting even louder for those who do remember. And that's a pattern that repeats. Yeah, think of the old communities bulldozed for new subway lines, for example. Yeah, so this story is always progress, but the subtext is always erasure. And the main story is we're progressing forward, but the subtext is we are erasing lots of old stuff. And as I mentioned earlier, also in the intro, there's still a few more languages to it. Because if the city is constantly shouting about corporate future and quietly erasing its inconvenient past, where do the real people fit in is the question. And that brings me to the third language, the one spoken from the bottom up, the language of resistance. It's often messy, it's chaotic, and it's unofficial, but it's how the city talks back to power. And you can see it in many areas. You can see it painted on the walls, street art that pops up in alleys, soils, on construction sites. It's vibrant, it's chaotic, but it's a form of conversation. It's a form of vernacular communication, and that kind of communication tries to reclaim public space from the blank walls of the developers and the glossy billboards of the advertisers. It's people literally writing their own stories onto the city. And you can also taste it at the communication of street food stalls. It's a perfect act of resistance. It's plastic stools, it's handwritten signs, it's ad hoc locations on sidewalks. It's everything the sleek, air-conditioned mall is not. Next theory, it's a form of placemaking that is temporary, but community-focused and defiantly uncorporate. And let me add one more example. The Wind motorcycle, right? The motorcycle taxi drivers. Look at any major street corner, you'll see a self-organized system of logistics, hand-painted signs, of course, the brightly colored vests, we all know, of course, their informal queuing rules, right? It's a completely bottom-up communication and transportation network that works in parallel to, and often actually, let's be honest, more efficiently, the German approves, than the official systems, right? It's a perfect example of what actually another famous theorist, Antonio Gramsci, called counter-hegemony. Okay, so we have hegemony and we have counter-hegemony. And it's more about the way that ordinary people create their own cultures and practices that resist the dominant, the official way of doing things. They're not staging a protest, but their very existence and organization is a challenge to the top-down, the sanitized version of the city. So now we had like three massive forces of communicating, right? They're all coming at us and through us every single day. The aspirational push for this globalized, awesome future, the systematic erasure of inconvenient pasts, and the stubborn, chaotic resistance of everyday life. And this brings us now to the final, the crucial act, if you will. What does this do to us, the individual residents who have to navigate this communicative battlefield? And this is now where I bring in one more foundational theory of sociology. We had this before on this podcast. It's called symbolic interactionism. It's a fancy term for a simple idea. A society isn't just a big structure that imposes itself on us. It's something we actively create and recreate through our daily interactions and the meanings we assign to those interactions. And so we as the citizens are the ones who ultimately give the city its meaning by how we choose to navigate it. So think about the daily performance of a typical Bangkokian, Bangkok person from Bangkok. It's a masterclass in communicative code switching, another theory. Okay, so you might walk through air-conditioned luxury of CM Paragon, projecting an image of like middle-class success, speaking the language of aspiration, right? An hour later, you're sitting on a plastic stool ordering noodles from a street vendor. You have a long-standing relationship with that street vendor. You've been going there ever since you arrived in Bangkok or since you were growing up or something. Yeah, you're speaking in a more informal, communal way. That's like the language of resistance. And then in a private line group, because we all live online, with trusted friends, you might share like a meme that subtly references a political event that someone would want you to not think about, which then is participating in the memory of erasure, right? Okay, so we're consistently shifting our communicative performance to match the space that we are in. And our smartphones, they have become the primary interface for this navigation. Maybe use Google Maps, at least I have to use it all the time in Bangkok to find our way through the city, right? Then you post IG stories from like the chic cafes and the malls to perform our aspirational self. And then we switch to the private chat to discuss things we'd never say in public. Yeah. So the digital layer is how we manage all those contradictions within the city. And the result of all that is kind of a fractured citizenship. And we learn to live with the cognitive dissonance. We had this before in the part 2, like to hold all these conflicting truths at once. We become experts at reading subtext, at understanding what's being performed versus what is real, and at choosing which language to speak at any given moment. So we're basically fluent at lots of different languages at the same time, and we choose like which language are we participating in right now. So the true story of Bangkok isn't just written on its walls, right? It's written in the the daily communicative choices of the millions of people who call Bangkok their home. And it's found in the friction between the city's competing languages, aspiration, erasure, and resistance. And in the depth, often exhausting performance of the citizens who have learned to speak all of those languages. That's it for this episode of FunkyPod, Mindful Media and Communication. So next time you're out in any city, look around, listen, and let me know what your city is trying to tell you. Shout out in the comments, leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. Subscribe, share if you found this interesting, if you want more of this kind of content. Until then, walk around with open eyes, take care, stay safe, and we talk soon. Sawadee khao.